The house didn't look haunted. That was Ethan Bell's first thought as he pulled his dusty Subaru up the long gravel driveway and saw the old thing standing between the trees, quiet and still like it had been waiting for him. It was early September, and the leaves had just started to turn. A few red ones clung to the trees, like blood drops in a sea of green. Harlow Lake shimmered behind the house, calm and dark like black glass. The sun was setting low, casting long shadows over the roof. Ethan turned off the engine and sat there a moment, gripping the steering wheel. His hands were shaking again, just a little. Not from fear, not yet. From the pills, probably, or from grief. After a while, it was hard to tell the difference. "You're here," he muttered to himself. No turning back now. He got out of the car, joints aching. The air smelled like pine and old water, peaceful, quiet, too quiet. The house on Harlow Lake had been empty for 26 years. The real estate agent, a woman named Carol who had smiled too much and blinked too little, had told him that on the phone. "It's been in and out of the market, but no one ever stays long. Some say it's bad luck," she'd said, with a nervous laugh. "But it's solid. Just needs some love. Bad luck." That's what people always said when they didn't want to say something real. Like death. Or ghosts. Ethan didn't care. He didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. And even if they were real, what could a ghost do to a man who'd already lost everything? He climbed the creaking front steps and unlocked the door. The key turned hard, like it hadn't been used in years. The door swung open with a groan, and stale air rolled out, thick with the scent of dust, wood rot, and something else. Something sour underneath, like old meat. He stepped inside. The living room was big, full of shadows and covered furniture. White sheets draped over everything like ghosts at a costume party. The floor creaked under his boots. There was an old brick fireplace against the far wall, and a staircase to the left that twisted up into darkness. Ethan dropped his duffel bag on the floor and sighed. Home sweet home. He didn't unpack. He didn't wander the house. Instead, he went to the back door, stepped out onto the porch, and stared out at the lake. Harlow Lake stretched out in front of him, black and endless. No houses nearby. No boat docks. Just pine trees lining the shore and the reflection of the dying sky. It was perfect for writing, Carol had said. Peaceful. Secluded. Ethan hadn't written a word in almost a year, not since Melanie died. His wife had been the kind of woman who made everything better just by being near. She had laughed with her whole face and cried at dumb commercials. Her death had come out of nowhere. One moment she was alive, sitting on the porch drinking coffee, and the next she was lying cold in the garden, her mouth open like she was still trying to scream. A brain aneurysm, the doctors had said. Fast and final. Just like that. Since then, Ethan had been drifting. The house they shared became unbearable. Every room felt like her. Every noise made him turn his head, expecting her to be there. So when Carol showed him this place, cheap and remote, something in him said yes before he even saw it in person. The wind shifted, and he smelled something again. That same sour scent, stronger now. He turned back toward the house. Old pipes, he muttered. Or something dead in the walls. He went back inside, locking the door behind him. He'd deal with it later. For now, he needed sleep. He dreamed of her that night. In the dream, Melanie was standing at the edge of the lake in a white dress, her long black hair blowing over her face. She didn't say anything. She just pointed at the house behind him. Her mouth moved, but there was no sound. Then she began to cry. When he woke up, the sound was still there. A soft crying. Ethan sat up in the musty bed upstairs, heart pounding. The room was dark. He hadn't turned on any lights when he stumbled up here last night. The crying continued, quiet and high, pitched, like a child sobbing behind a closed door. It was coming from downstairs. He told himself it was a dream, just a leftover echo from his subconscious. But he got up anyway, barefoot, moving slowly down the narrow stairs. The sound grew louder with each step. Definitely a child. Definitely real. He reached the bottom and stood in the dark living room. The sound was coming from the hallway to the left, the one he hadn't explored yet. "Hello," he called. The crying stopped, just like that. He stood there, heart pounding in his chest like a drum. His skin was cold, his breath coming in short bursts. He told himself it was just an animal, or his imagination, or stress. He went to the kitchen, drank a glass of stale water from the tap, and went back upstairs. The crying didn't come back. Morning came, pale and cold. Ethan woke to silence and the feeling that someone had been standing over him in the night. Watching. Breathing. He brushed it off. Just a dream. Another one. The kind that clings to your skin like cobwebs. Downstairs, the light coming through the curtains had a yellow sickliness to it, as if the sun didn't want to shine too bright on this house. Dust floated in the beams like snow. He made instant coffee and drank it black. No sugar. No cream. The kitchen still smelled faintly sour. Then he noticed the footprints. Small ones. In the dust-covered wood floor near the hallway. They were faint but there, leading from the back of the house toward the living room, then disappearing. They weren't his. Too small. Too light, barefoot. Ethan stood still, his mug halfway to his lips. His skin went cold. "Okay," he said softly to himself. "Raccoon. Maybe. Or, hell. I tracked something in." But he looked down at his boots, still by the front door where he'd kicked them off last night. He hadn't walked barefoot yet. Not once. He followed the prints, step by careful step, until they stopped just in front of the fireplace. The hearth was coated in thick dust. No ashes inside, no logs, just cobwebs and old soot. The footprints ended there. Like whoever, or whatever, had walked in, had simply vanished. He bent down and touched one of the prints. The dust had been disturbed recently. Last night, this morning, it didn't matter. He was alone, or supposed to be. "Carol," he muttered, shaking his head. "You didn't say anything about kids breaking in." The crying last night. The dream. The prints. Ethan wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but something was off here. Deeply off. He went back to the hallway where the crying had come from. A narrow space, lined with cracked wallpaper and old portraits. There were 4 doors. 2 were closets, filled with broken chairs and moth-eaten coats. One led to a small bathroom. The last was locked. A child's room, maybe. He didn't know. He tried the doorknob again. Still locked. It rattled, like something behind it shifted in answer. His stomach turned. The rest of the day passed slowly. He cleaned a bit, opened windows to air the place out, tried to forget the prints, the crying, the door. That night, he tried to write. It had been months since he even tried. He sat at the old desk he'd brought with him, placed near the window overlooking the lake. His fingers hovered over the keys. Then he heard the whisper, soft, like paper tearing. It came from the hallway again. He turned slowly in his chair. Nothing there, but the air felt colder. He got up and walked to the hallway, pausing at the locked door. He pressed his ear against it. Silence. Then, "Daddy." Ethan flinched, stepped back. His heart thundered. The voice was tiny, high. A child's voice. A girl's. He hadn't been called Daddy in his life. "Who's there?" he said, loud now. No answer. He went to the toolbox in the kitchen, found a flathead screwdriver, and jammed it into the lock. The metal creaked. The handle turned. The door opened with a slow, aching groan. Inside was a child's bedroom, frozen in time. A small white bed with a pink quilt. Shelves of dusty dolls. A cracked rocking horse in the corner. Everything was covered in gray, like no one had stepped foot in here for years. But the bed was rumpled, as if someone had just gotten up. The sour smell was strongest here. Ethan backed out and closed the door. He didn't sleep that night. The next day, Ethan drove into town. He needed air, people, answers. Harlow was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know everything, and nothing all at once. A single main street, a diner, a library, an old general store. He went to the library. An older man sat behind the desk, sipping coffee. His name tag read Stanley. "Morning," Ethan said. "I'm looking for anything you have on the lake house. The one at the end of Harlow Road." Stanley stiffened just a bit. "That old place?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm renting it. Thought I'd look into the history." Stanley scratched his cheek and gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Not much to read. But you could try the old newspaper archives. Back room." Ethan thanked him and went digging. The archives were dusty and yellowed, stored in filing cabinets and boxes. He found it, a newspaper from 1997, a headline that made his skin crawl. "Local girl disappears from lake house. No trace found." The article was short. A 7-year-old girl named Anna Leigh McCarthy had vanished from the house. Her parents were found dead days later. Apparent murder, suicide. No signs of struggle. The girl was never found. The house was sold, then abandoned. Ethan stared at the black and white photo in the paper. A little girl in pigtails, smiling wide. His hand trembled. It was the same voice, the same footprints, the same crying. He shoved the article in his coat pocket and left the library without another word. Ethan didn't go back to the house right away. He sat in his car outside the diner for a long time, gripping the steering wheel with cold fingers. The girl in the newspaper, Anna Leigh McCarthy. He whispered her name aloud, like trying it on for size. Something about it felt too familiar now, like the house had already whispered it in his dreams. He finally drove back around sunset. The road curved through tall pines, the lake dark beside him like an open mouth. The house stood waiting. It always seemed to be waiting. Inside, everything was exactly as he left it. Almost. The locked door, the child's room, was wide open. He hadn't left it that way. And the bed. The bed looked slept in again. Only this time the doll on the pillow was sitting up, staring at the door. Ethan slowly stepped inside. He'd brought the newspaper article with him, folded and creased in his coat pocket. He pulled it out and looked down at the picture of Anna Leigh again. The girl was smiling in the photo. But there was something sad in her eyes, something hollow, like she'd already seen the end. "I know who you are," he said softly. The room creaked, but no reply came. He sat down on the edge of the bed, the old frame groaning under his weight. The smell, sweet, wrought and mildew, was strong enough to make his eyes water. "Are you still here?" he asked the empty room. The doll on the pillow fell forward, just tipped over. No breeze, no movement, just dropped. Ethan stood up fast. His legs felt weak. That night, he locked the door to Anna's room from the outside. Then he slid a chair in front of it, just in case, because even if she was a ghost, he wasn't sure she was alone. Sleep didn't come. Not fully. The house was loud that night, not in an obvious way. Not footsteps or slamming doors. Not like the movies. It was the kind of loud you feel in your teeth. The baseboards popped like knuckles. The walls groaned like something inside them was stretching. And beneath it all, just under the edge of hearing, whispers. Ethan lay in bed with his eyes open, heart pounding, ears straining. One word came through clearer than the rest. "Help." That did it. He sat up, turned on every light in the bedroom, and stayed up until the sky turned pale and blue. By morning, the whispers were gone. But the footprints were back, leading from Anna's room, all the way to the side of his bed. Around noon, a knock came at the front door. Ethan nearly jumped out of his skin. He opened it to find a woman in her 50s, standing on the porch, wearing jeans, boots, and a faded flannel shirt. Her gray hair was tied back, and she carried a box in her hands. "You're the writer," she said flatly. Ethan blinked. "Excuse me. I live up the road," she added. "Name's Helen. My brother was the sheriff back when Anna went missing." You're staying in that house." He stepped aside slowly. "Do you want to come in?" She looked past him into the dark hallway. "No, I won't step inside that place again." She handed him the box. "Old files," she said. "Things my brother kept, notes, some photos. He never believed the case was closed. Always said something was wrong with that house. Something evil." Ethan took the box. It was heavier than it looked. "Thank you," he said. "Why?" "She cries at night," Helen interrupted. His skin crawled. "She cried every night for weeks before she disappeared. Her parents thought she was having nightmares. Then one day, the crying stopped. And so did she." Ethan swallowed. Helen turned and walked off the porch. Before she reached her truck, she paused. "If the house starts talking to you," she said without turning around, "don't talk back." Then she got in and drove away. Ethan brought the box to the kitchen and dumped it out on the table. It was full of yellowed pages, a few old photographs, and several cassette tapes. He picked up a photo. A black and white shot of the McCarthy family. There was Anna, smiling on her father's lap. Her mother stood behind them, hand resting on her husband's shoulder. All three looked normal, happy. But in the background, in the hallway behind them, a shadow. Tall, thin, featureless. A trick of the light, maybe. He flipped it over. McCarthy family, October 1996, 1 month before she vanished. He played one of the cassette tapes on an old handheld recorder that Helen had included. Her brother's voice crackled through. "Recording this for my own notes." The McCarthy girl started saying she had an invisible friend. The tall man, she called him, said he lived in the walls. Her parents thought she was just being creative, but she was terrified. Said he watched her while she slept. Said he whispered to her at night. Tried to make her hurt her mother. Ethan paused the tape. His hands were shaking again. There was something very wrong with the house. It wasn't just Anna. It was something older. Something hungry. Ethan couldn't shake the image of the shadow from the photograph. It stayed with him, like an itch he couldn't scratch, growing under his skin. He spent the next few days poring over the old files, the tapes, and photographs Helen had given him. The house seemed to pulse with the dark energy of the past, as if it had been waiting for him to uncover its secrets. The whispers came again each night, sometimes louder, sometimes barely a breath, but always there. And always that word, help. The tall man, the creature Anna had called her, invisible friend, seemed to be the center of everything, the cause of all the strange happenings. Ethan found more in the tapes. A chilling detail about Anna's final days in the house. Anna's room is the one with the cracks. The walls, they're not just splitting, they're moving. The tall man is inside the walls, moving with them. He comes for her at night, but he's not the only one. The house, it's alive. The last line echoed in his mind long after the tape stopped. One night, Ethan woke with a start, a strange feeling pulling him from sleep. His heart raced. He glanced at the clock, 2:47 a.m. The house was still. But then, he heard it. A soft scraping sound from inside the walls, like fingernails dragging slowly across wood. Then, the whispers. "Help me." The sound was unmistakable now. Not just the child's voice, Anna's voice, desperate, choking on fear. He threw the covers off and stood, his heart thundering in his chest. The scraping grew louder. His feet moved toward the source, his breath shallow. The walls. The sound was coming from inside the walls. Ethan grabbed the nearest tool, his flashlight, and moved to the corner of the living room. The same corner where he'd seen the shadows the first time, where the room felt darkest. He shined the beam into the crack between the walls. The beam flickered. For a moment, he swore he saw something in the dark, something tall, thin, jagged, something that didn't belong. It shifted. Then the wall moved. The wall itself buckled and groaned like something was pressing against it from the inside. He stumbled back, heart pounding. He wasn't imagining it. The walls were alive. Something was trying to get out. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. Silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence that reassured you. No, this was the silence of something waiting. The tall man was waiting. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He spent hours pacing the house, jumping at every creak and groan, until finally, something inside him snapped. He needed answers. He needed to know what was down there, beneath the house. The basement. The house's foundation had always unsettled him, even when he'd first arrived. The concrete steps leading down into the blackness below felt like a door to another world. Cold, empty. But now, the fear had bloomed into something more. A gut feeling that this was where it all started. It was almost dawn when he grabbed the flashlight and walked to the basement door. The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended, each step sending a small echo that vibrated through the air like a warning. The basement was worse than he'd imagined. Dust and cobwebs clung to everything, but there were markings on the walls, scratches and gouges, scrawled in what looked like something wet. Blood. Something had been down here. Something had been trapped. A small window on the far wall flickered with pale light. The air smelled fall. Rot. The very air tasted stale, like it had been sitting there for decades. He turned the flashlight on. It swept across the room, revealing a corner filled with broken furniture, old crates, and a large, rusted iron door. The door wasn't on any of the house's plans. It didn't exist. But there it was, staring back at him. A cold sweat broke out on Ethan's skin as he walked toward it, each step heavier than the last. He tried the handle. It was unlocked. The door swung open with a horrible, screeching sound. The room behind it was smaller than he thought, crammed with crates and rusted metal. But it was what was on the far wall that made his breath freeze. A large hole. The edges of the hole were jagged, like something had torn its way out, or in. The air around it hummed with a strange energy, as though the very fabric of the house was shaking in fear. Something had come through that hole. Something had left. Ethan didn't even think. He had to know. He stepped forward, his feet heavy in the dust. Then, his flashlight caught something else. A name, scratched into the wall next to the hole. Anna. The scrawl was frenzied, desperate. Anna had been here. She had seen it too. But Anna hadn't left. The whispers came back, low, distant, like a murmur behind his ear. Help me. Suddenly, the light flickered. Ethan turned, heart racing. The tall man. He saw him in the corner of his eye. A tall, thin shape, crouching in the shadows. No face, no eyes. Just endless black, stretching and crawling over the walls. He heard the voice again. Help me. But this time, it wasn't Anna's voice. It was something worse. The tall man stepped out of the shadows. Ethan froze. The creature that stood before him wasn't like anything he had ever seen. It wasn't just tall. It wasn't just thin. It was wrong. It stretched across the corner of the basement, twisting in ways no human body could. Its limbs were far too long, joints too sharp, and its skin, if it could even be called skin, was like shadow, shifting, writhing as if it were not a thing of flesh, but something darker, a living nightmare made of whispers and darkness. Its face, if it had one, was a void, a blackness that sucked in the dim light of his flashlight, distorting the air around it. Ethan couldn't breathe. His chest tightened. The fear that had been gnawing at him for weeks suddenly exploded into full terror. It wasn't just watching him. It was waiting for him. The tall man did not speak with a mouth. It spoke with the air itself, a voice that thrummed in his mind, like 1,000 whispers pressing against his skull. You should have never come here. The sound wasn't a voice. It was more like a presence. The words echoed inside him, in his bones, in his bloodstream, making his heart race in terror. Without thinking, Ethan turned and bolted toward the stairs. His legs were heavy, his feet stumbling over the wooden steps. but his heart was pounding too loudly to hear anything else. The world spun. He could feel the tall man following him, its presence closing in. As he reached the top of the stairs, something grabbed his ankle. He screamed. But it wasn't the tall man's hands. No, it wasn't even something tangible. It was the house itself. The walls reached out for him, dragging him backward. The wood groaned. The floorboards buckled under his weight, and the very air turned heavy, thick with a suffocating pressure. The whispers grew louder. "Help me." It was Anna. Ethan twisted in horror, but there was nothing to see. No physical form, no figure. The house was alive with the memories of those who had suffered in its walls. Anna's cry was a warning. He pushed against the floor, his palms slipping, but he couldn't break free. Then, he saw something, a shadow darting across the hallway. A shape, small, a girl's figure. Anna, her voice, soft but clear in the midst of the chaos, whispered to him, "Get out. Leave." Ethan tore himself free, staggering toward the front door. The house seemed to fight against him, groaning and snapping, but with one final push, he flung the door open. It wasn't a moment too soon. The tall man was there, blocking the doorway, its body impossibly large now, consuming the entire frame of the door, its form twisting in grotesque ways. The thing reached toward him, but Ethan, terrified, adrenaline pumping, slammed the door shut, stumbling into the yard. The sky was dim, the sun barely breaking through the clouds. But Ethan didn't care. He ran. He ran through the overgrown yard, past the lake, ignoring the way the world seemed to tilt around him. He didn't stop until he reached the road. He kept running until his lungs burned, until the house was nothing but a distant shadow behind him. Weeks passed, but the nightmares didn't stop. Ethan still saw the tall man in the darkness. He could hear the whispers, even in the silence of his own home. He tried to leave Harlow Lake, tried to find peace, but the house had marked him. It had pulled him in, and now it wouldn't let him go. The files Helen had given him never left his side, but the more he read them, the more he realized that Anna wasn't the first child to disappear in the house. The McCarthys were just one in a long line of families that had vanished, their children swallowed by the darkness. The house was older than anyone knew. Its roots stretched back far beyond Harlow Lake, to a time when it had been a place of worship, a place where dark things were summoned, where creatures like the tall man had been invoked. Ethan knew now that the house wasn't haunted by a single ghost. It was haunted by many, and the tall man, he was its guardian, the thing that fed off fear, the thing that kept it alive. One night, months later, Ethan received a call. It was a local sheriff from Harlow Lake. There had been another disappearance. A girl, no older than Anna. Ethan's stomach churned. It was happening again. He didn't go back. He couldn't. The house still called to him in his dreams, still promised him the truth, still whispered its hunger for more. But he knew now what he had to do. The tall man had claimed Anna, and it was going to claim more, unless someone stopped it. But the house had no intention of letting go of him. Not yet, not ever.